What's up, guys? I'm EJ. I'm joined by Kendall, and thank you all for checking out this edition of our Loki episode recap review and discussion. Kendall, this episode 5, Journey into Mystery, the penultimate episode of this 6 episode season 1 of Loki. I thought this was a pretty fun ride. I thought that this episode, um, I imagined we would have a lot of time. Now we know where we went. We went to the void. I didn't know if I expected both Loki and Sylvie and Mobius to all be in the same place. Though I guess it's very convenient. I think just from a story standpoint to make that be the case. But I enjoyed my time in the void. I enjoyed my time learning about the other Lokis and the continuing tea leaves that continue to be dropped about the stuff going on with the TVA. It just pulls me in even more. I thought we would maybe learn a little bit more, but I think we got some things that I think we needed to hear in regards to where things stand and where certain people stand that I thought was a big deal this week.
Yeah, I mean, coming off what I thought an incredible episode last week, they had a lot. They had a tough act to follow. They had a lot to prove this week.
Definitely.
Obviously, we had a lot of theories, rolling around last week, and I feel like this episode it may not have been as fast paced or as hectic as the last one, but it really served as an incredible bridge, I think, to the finale. Um, and I feel like in all three of the Disney Plus series that we've had so far, I feel like the penultimate episodes acted a little bit as a bridge to get to the finale,
Yeah.
and I feel like this one did as well. It set you up with um, having these characters that we hadn't seen. You introduce them in the post-credit scene of the last one, and then you have to explain who they are and do all of that. And then you also have to explain what happened, what's going on with Sylvie and Renslayer, what's going on with Mobius, and all these to tie in all these different things. Then somehow get them off-world, which that is a whole nother conversation of who's off-world, where are they even,
Yeah.
So we'll get into all that. But yeah, I thought it was a very interesting episode.
Yeah, it certainly was. And again, I think shout out to a lot of the special guest appearances we had in this episode. I think all of them were a welcome addition to the show. And I'm curious. We don't know where this show is going to end, but I am curious if any of them will have a second or third act future in the MCU. I think there's certainly a possibility for at least some of them. But let's begin talking about this episode called Journey into Mystery, which in itself is an Easter egg right there, because of course that title Journey into Mystery is actually the original. This was the comic book that introduced Thor, the character, the MCU character, or the Marvel character in the comic books, and eventually also introduced Loki. So that was a nice nod there. And this episode had plenty of different nods to the comic books and plenty of different Easter eggs. And I love the open, by the way, very cinematic. Very, I felt I'm not a huge, and I've heard a lot of people make comparisons to this show. I'm not a huge Doctor Who fan, but I felt like the open to this episode with the swirling shots of all the different places you see the TVA first, kind of business as usual. We kind of got a confirmation that it seems like the sacred timeline is now fine because you see in that opening shot that line is just flat. There's no issues. So whatever issues I've been holding on to this thing. Episode 2, Sylvie did all that stuff. What happened? It seems like they were able to figure out or fix whatever those issues were from when she sent all those temp pads out to all those different time points. Um, but seeing that cool shot of them go from the TVA to inside that chamber where you see the head of the now android slash robot timekeeper, which is funny. Someone also made a point that this also was kind of a reference to Falcon and Winter Soldier, where Sam says, all we deal with is, what, wizards, androids, and something else.
Alien.
Monsters, aliens. There you go. And somebody's like, see, the androids right there. So this is another one. But then eventually going from there to where we are, and this is where a lot of this episode takes place, which is the void. We learned a great deal about the void in this episode. Um, though to be fair, I don't know if we have the greatest
Intel.
most reliable, you know, storytellers or knowledge givers
narrators. Yeah.
when it comes to what the void is. We see Remslayer, uh, uh, explanation to Sylvie, in which she basically says that it's a point, and they get kind of close because then Kid Loki and the Lokis also kind of explain a similar thing, but they don't know exactly where they are because they just got sent off, so they only know from their perspective. Remslayer is saying what she's saying, but we know she lies and she doesn't tell the truth. So who knows where exactly they are? But the story we get is essentially when you get pruned, you get sent to what they call the void. The void being the absolute end of time, the timeline. And at this point, for whatever reason, time stops. It doesn't do anything. And Remslayer's explanation is the timekeepers or whoever's behind now TVA, which is still. I think Verona knows who it is, or at least has a better idea that she's leading on. Um, but their whole goal, apparently, to her knowledge, is to create a utopia at the end of that timeline. Um, but this is essentially a point in time where they just send all the matter from these pruned realities to this location. And when we get to that location in the void, we see why those timelines don't ever go anywhere, because you have Eliath there to eat everything up. So, Kendall, just on the concept of the void, based on how Ravonna explains it to Sylvie, though under duress, and again, not most reliable. And then from the standpoint of the Lokis, where they say, look, all we know is the TVA sends all this trash here, and Eliath eats it all up. What did you make of that, and how much of the surface level explanation of where people get pruned and where realities get pruned? Because again, it wasn't just people. It's just like when they also reset a timeline, all of that matter gets sent to this place. What did you make of that, just as a whole, and how reliable do you feel that explanation is?
So, um, the idea and the concept of the void, I thought made sense. I feel like the idea that they would send these people to the end of time, we really don't know like what context or what that really means, but
Mm-hmm.
in TVA speak, it seems to make sense. In terms of Renslayer, I feel like you're right in that I don't know if her entire history lesson was to be believed.
Mm-hmm.
But I do get the sense that she doesn't know who runs the TVA either. And I think that kind of goes back to the conversation we had last week, where we in the flashback that we saw last week, that she also used to be a TVA agent. And she
That's
was,
true.
before she was a judge, she was one of the um, you know uh, agents, or she's one of the cops, and that was a revelation that suggests that, I mean, I guess she's a variant of somebody as well, who they turned into a TVA agent just like they did to Mobius and the rest of the TVA. And if that's the case, I mean, if they don't know, then I would assume that means she doesn't know, unless her being a judge makes her more privy to information that the rest of them aren't privy to. Clearly, she knows more than
Yeah.
the rest. Obviously, the scene. I think the scene that makes it clear that, not clear, but the thing that suggests that she may not know is when she goes to Miss Minutes at the end and is like, "I want all the files on the beginning of in the creation of the TVA."
Yeah.
And so that kind of, because that wasn't for show. That
No.
wasn't, her interrogating somebody.
Right.
That wasn't her, um, trying to pull a fast one on somebody. That was her trying to dig up information for herself. And you would assume that's information she's already had. So
And
I
and
thought that
and,
was
and,
interesting.
and then even with B-15, when they have that conversation, and she goes, why are you trying to do this? And she's like, well, one, the person, whoever is behind this, is in danger, which is interesting that she cares that much about them. But also, she just seems to have a true interest in wanting to know who this person is. I feel like I agree that I don't think she knows everything, but I think she knows a little bit more than she's letting on still. I don't
Right.
think she knows how the TVA was created. I don't think she knows maybe even who the exact person is, but I think the communication. I think she was not. I don't believe that she didn't. That she thought that those timekeepers were like not robots. But that's my
Right.
opinion. She didn't seem shocked. She's never seemed to question that aspect of it. I think she knows there's some person or something behind this that's not the timekeepers, but for whatever reason, she hasn't been able to get further than that, and that has sparked her interest in this. I do know that she knows a great deal because she knows that when people get pruned, you don't die, you know?
Yeah.
And we know that other TVA agents don't know that.
Yeah. Didn't know that.
Because she when Sylvie self prunes herself in that during that standoff, that first was a conversation. It seemed like an alliance was built, and then obviously realized Miss Minutes once again continuing to have way more abilities than maybe we think, was able to kind of alert the other authorities and play this ruse to try to get the soldiers there to back up Ravonna. But there, when Sylvie self prunes and she's like, "Oh, good. Well, now she's dead." We know that's not. We know that not to be true because she tells Ravonna. Excuse me. She tells Sylvie just minutes before that, "Hey, Loki's not dead. This is actually where he went." So again, the level of information that she knows that she's not willing to divulge continues to kind of spill in different areas, and that was I thought was a very key area, which is why again when she says I tend to believe that it probably is the end of time, but I've learned to say that anything she tells someone that isn't whoever's behind this, I can't fully believe because
Yeah.
she's shown to lie to different people for whatever reason to keep up the ruse. So that's just something that
We'll
I keep note of.
we'll get to who we think could be behind the TVA and how strong we feel about the Kang theory this week as opposed to the last
Mm-hmm.
4 weeks. But I do think that it was an interesting development with Renslayer not obviously knowing who the person is. Um, because going into it, you would have assumed, given Renslayer and Kang's history in the comics, that she may have known all along what was going on, and she would have been an agent of Kang. But that doesn't seem to be as clear as maybe we would have thought it would have been. So something to keep track of.
It certainly is. Now let's go back to the Void. So Loki's introduced to these first four Lokis that he comes in contact with after he wakes up. We have Kid Loki, who we now know was also, I guess, kind of the unofficial king of the land there.
Yes,
We
King
had
Joffrey.
yeah. So we had Kid Loki. We had Old Loki. Again, shout out to the old costume and the old look. It just was kind of wild that every single show in the Disney, or not every single show, but at least WandaVision went with the old costumes, and then now you have Loki also. Shout out to the
Yes.
original Jack Kirby
We had the
costumes.
Captain America, First Avenger.
Yes, exactly. So the Disney shows continuing to show homage in a major way. And then we have Black Loki, for lack of a better term. I don't know what else to call him.
Yeah, I think they're calling him boastful Loki.
Boastful
I don't know
Loki,
what that
okay. Well, I think boastful because remember in his story when they talk about how they all became,
Right.
he
He's
says
kinda-
that I defeated Captain America and gained all the Infinity Stones. And
he's cooking the books.
Gator Loki, the fourth Loki, basically
Yeah.
says that's Cap, dog. That's
Yeah.
Cap, and then they get into a little bit of a fight over that situation. So I guess that's why they're calling him boastful Loki. And then of course again we have Gator Loki, who we don't ever hear speak English or anything, but they seem to understand him and they seem to take him in
Right.
as a Loki, even though Mobius is skeptical at best. Though I love Mobius' line. He's like, well, if he's lying that he's not a Loki, then he probably is a Loki. like even if he was lying, that would be very well in line with Loki. So it's like who's to say? But I just thought that element to this episode with those four were just it just was perfect to me because
Right.
you realize, and I saw someone make an example of showing, and this was when the other Lokis appear, where President Loki and various others then show up on their doorstep. someone made the reference that seeing watching Avengers Loki watching these people is very akin to when Hulk, Smart Hulk was watching, Professor Hulk was watching, himself from the Avengers and being
Yeah,
like, oh my god, that's how I felt to me.
yeah.
Our Loki felt this week, but to be honest, really they all kind of have those same feelings, especially when the other more barbaric Lokis kind of show up. And when they eventually escape, Kid Loki kind of goes on a little bit of a rant, being like, if you improve yourself as Loki, this is where you end up. And old Loki's like, basically like these clowns over here, like don't understand, none of this matters. And I just really enjoyed everything about their insertion in this episode. What did you make of being introduced to these new Lokis?
One of the things that I've loved about this show, and how it's such, I love how it's such a deep dive into the mind and psychology of Loki, and it's almost made like the term Loki into like a common noun where just
Right.
yeah, this guy's a Loki, what a
Yeah.
Loki this guy is, like like what that's always he's always just been a character, and now like there's so many different versions and there's so many different types of Loki, but um but yeah, no, I mean, I thought this episode did an excellent job of, really bringing in these different people who have their differences, but at the same time, they're also somewhat playing almost the same character or similar characters. I thought Richard E. Grant, you could tell he's playing almost an older version of the Hiddleston,
Yes.
Loki, and even the kid Loki, Jack Veal, was almost playing a younger version, and how they played off each other really well. Um, I thought I thought that was an excellent it was an excellent sort of thing that they had to juggle. I feel like the twist that you see in the trailers, that President Loki, and you're thinking that that's our
Yeah.
Loki,
Of
and the
course.
fact that it wasn't, I was like, oh, that threw me off.
Yeah, I loved it
uh,
though.
yeah, and that was one of the last things that we had seen, that we had left, of footage from
Yeah.
the trailers, and people were wondering where was that, and it happened, but not in a way that many people would have expected.
And it's
Um,
so funny because that Loki is so over the top. Like that Loki is clearly like the 2012 Loki if he never like learned anything or just
right.
he went down some weird path that ended up turning him into a politician. But either way, like he's Hiddleston at the beginning of the series. Like no self awareness.
Yeah,
Like it's like, and to see him be that extra again. Like I think there's a part when he's doing that monologue where like our Loki looks like, oh my god, this guy, like
yeah, yeah,
'cause
and
it's like really this was me.
and you make a great point about the Bruce Banner part of it,
Yeah.
because you know there's been such a character development from this Loki from that first Avengers movie, and like to see him grow. And I mean, we've only had 4 episodes coming into this, and he's now a very different character than he
Yeah.
was, and he's very different even from the Loki that we had in Endgame,
Yeah,
in
or,
post
Ra- or
2012.
Ragnarok. Yeah.
Yeah, Ragnarok. Yeah, it's an Endgame. Yeah,
Yeah, Infinity War.
you know.
Right. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, I mean, I feel like it's really interesting. I mean, look, we don't really know what's gonna happen to this Loki character
Hmm.
coming into it. It almost felt like a Black Widow situation where you kind of felt like this may be his swan song. It may still be. We really don't know, but
It's interesting that it sounds like you're going towards the other way where you feel like this is
yeah.
gonna
But
open up more
now
for him.
they may be setting him up to have a future in the MCU, and that's not something that I had expected coming into this, or even really thought about. Um, even less than expected. But I hadn't really thought about the idea that what if Loki survives this, and what if Loki gets out, and what if Loki, you know, continues on in the MCU in our timeline. So that'll be an interesting thing to monitor. But there's been such character development. I think this episode really highlighted that.
So the things we learned about the other Lokis, Kid Loki, when Hiddleston or no, our Loki, our Hiddleston Loki says, "Why is this kid why are you following this kid? Why does
Yeah,
he have any clout? And he's like, the reason why my Nexus event happened was because I killed Thor. It's kind of
right.
definitely a drop the mic kind of
Yeah, mic
moment.
drop.
Yeah, because we know all of those, almost every one of those Lokis has tried their damnedest to kill Thor, and only it seems like only this one was able. It had to be only this one that could do it because that created the Nexus event. So that
Yeah,
leads to like, man, what did that kid do? How did he get it done? Was there any difference in how was the difference in age? Were they both kids, or is there a difference in age where he did it? Like, it just, I want to know like how that went down. Um, but I think even the more interesting one was old Loki's story, which was essentially how he escaped Thanos killing him, which is a very interesting thing to think about. So it seems like he goes through all the things that our Loki went through, and they get to that point, and he says he's able to create a projection of himself that is so lifelike that it makes Thanos think that he killed him, but in fact he actually shapeshifted into like an inanimate object, and was able to find a way to get out and drift into space, and eventually ended up on a like a no man's land planet, and was by himself, just kind of just at peace
yeah,
with himself, where things happened, except for the fact that he missed his brother, and because he missed Thor that much, he wanted to leave, and that's when him leaving because of that emotion picked them up. And it just once again goes back to that TVA and the good, bad, or indifferent about them. And you lean towards maybe this is more worse than even indifferent, because Loki, feeling that feeling for Thor is that much of an issue where he has to be removed from the equation. I mean,
So my
I am really starting to become like, we'll get to as soon or at some point what the hell's going on and who's behind this. But to me, whatever that sacred timeline is, it is not to the benefit of the universe. I'm almost certain of that. And I think we're learning these stories about some of these people, especially when we see, we now learn that, like Sylvie is a remarkable person. Like, old Loki is a remarkable person. He shows this in this episode. To me, when I see these people, I'm like, yeah, if I was someone who was trying to do whatever I was trying to do to make sure that the timeline works in my favor, these seem to be the kind of characters that could definitely impact me in a negative way. And I think we talked
right.
about it a little bit on the podcast, but I felt like this week there was more evidence of that as we learn more about. And to me, a Loki that can kill Thor, I mean, that's a very dangerous Loki. Someone
Right.
could have said, "Yo, get that guy out of
The
here."
way I'm
I don't want any smoke with someone who's that young that could kill his own brother and be
yeah,
do it effectively.
yeah,
Like,
Loki with a tesseract. Like, what is he gonna do? Like,
right? Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
you
No. No.
know,
No. We're not giving him that Tesseract. Come back here.
yeah. Now, the way I interpreted that whole thing is, or the way I interpret the way the TVA kind of works is that when it comes to each of the different Nexus events, I think it's more of a situation where they got rid of like Richard E. Grant's Loki, old Loki was taken because he is disrupting the timeline. Like, once the sacred timeline, anything that disrupts the path that leads to X timeline, whatever that
Yeah.
is, as we
But
saw in Doctor Strange, there's a
yeah.
million different outcomes, and anything that doesn't lead to outcome A, that's when the TVA steps in.
But you
And
notice how with we don't know the stories of the other Lokis, but if you notice with at least the main three, Sylvie, old Loki, and Kid Loki, every single Sylvie, she was a child, so we don't know much, but we know what she's become, and how powerful she is, and then
right,
we know, and then the most poignant line I think maybe from the entire episode is when that big projection old Loki does at the end of the episode, and Sylvie's like, how's he doing that? And Loki says, I don't think we understand how powerful we are. And
yeah,
then Kid Loki again kills Thor. Other Loki was able to project himself, and yes, the power he showed was immense to just escape Thanos. But then just a minute of him trying to come back to Earth to see if there or could just come back to find his brother to see if there's any chance to reconnect. All those things would be to me again a threat to somebody who wants universal dominance. Like, I don't think
potentially,
that I don't think that there's I don't think that they're benign. Yes, there are some that are benign. I think that whoever's behind this is very radical, where you could do something small and they're doing it. But I think also it's these large things where like, no, that can't
Right.
happen because that could be a threat to me, and let's
Right.
not let that happen. I that's how I feel at least.
Now, what's interesting, um, and our shout out to our dad because he had an interesting theory. He had an interesting way of looking at it, where um, old Loki, obviously old Loki, and also funny because the way I looked at the old Loki story was that he got out, and the reason that didn't create the Nexus event was because everybody thought he was dead. That's the way I viewed it. Could be wrong. We really
Right.
don't know, but I think
I
that
would agree with that.
because yeah, I think because he got out and faked his death, that and lived in solitude, like he wasn't disrupting anything. He was off the grid still, and so the timeline, his path still everything went as can be until he got out of seclusion and it was about to mess everything up. That's when the TVA stepped in and stopped everything. But
That's right.
um, our dad had an interesting theory that what if that story is what actually also happened in our timeline as well, because we don't,
Mm,
as far as we know, we don't. I mean, we think Loki's dead, but what if he's not?
right.
Now, you know, the only issue that I had with that theory was that it's an interesting thought, but the TVA, as far as we know, they know or they think, and it seems like they know that
Right.
Loki's dead because they showed him the footage. They're like,
Right.
this is where your time ends. And so it feels like I would imagine they would have known if he would have faked his death and been living on some secluded planet that they would have known that. So that's the only problem with that. But it is an interesting thought because, maybe he was able to outsmart the TVA as well.
Right.
We don't know that. We
Yeah,
really don't know that he
and
hasn't.
to be fair, I mean, again, the TVA haven't. They seem like they showed a lot of their cards about Loki. Just yeah, you died and you were a loser. But like, I mean, again, I also don't think they're the most reliable storytellers
Narrator.
with this stuff,
Yeah.
narrators with this stuff. So who's to say that they didn't just tell him that and give him files showing that his timeline ended there, just to
Right.
get him on message and on track for whatever they were trying to accomplish, which was trying to catch this variant, which we now know is Sylvie. So I don't think that that's a crazy idea. Especially if, because it's funny that you feel like you're leaning more towards Hiddleston will have a future in the MCU. I feel like everything that's happening with this story makes me feel like that this is more of a passing of the torch to Sylvie. That's just the feeling I have. Um, because I just feel like this Loki has he's overcome all the character flaws and all of the growth that he needed as a person. I feel like he's pretty much accomplished them all. So it's to me, I love the character. He's a fun. I mean, him just being in this environment, him just him like seeing the alligator. He's like, I gotta be honest, I'm not even that surprised at this point. Everything I've seen. I mean, Hiddleston's an amazing actor. I thought he played off of all of the absurdities of this episode extremely well, but the character development that this person needed has been accomplished for the almost
Right. And what
entirely.
other stories are there really to tell? He's got
Yeah,
his own show at this point.
yeah. To me, the only thing that is left for him is to do a truly selfless act, and I feel like they're solely setting himself up to maybe sacrifice himself to save Sylvie or something like that. Like I totally see, especially when there's been this talk about in this episode where they have that conversation right before they have that meeting with Elias, like like what are you gonna do after this, and Sylvie said, hey, maybe you could find a timeline to rule or whatever, and when he asks her what do you want to do, he's like I don't know. Um, when in this episode earlier in the episode when Ravonna is kind of taunting her and she's like, I'll put you in a time loop and give you a good memory. He's like, do you even have any of those? Like Sylvie has lived a very tortured life. I think that in some ways, I think this show is totally setting up for this Loki to teach Sylvie kind of how to live, or at least lead her on that path into how to live, and that this
Yeah.
could be kind of this could be his glorious purpose. And I'd argue he kind of admits that this is his glorious purpose. I think earlier at some point in the episode when it's actually when they're in that bunker and they're kind of going back and forth, and
Yeah.
Loki's talking about I gotta get out of here to what's the name, and old Loki's like, oh, you gotta go get to your glorious purpose back in the TVA, and he's like, well, something like that, because he sees that's how he sees Sylvie. And he said there's this
Right.
girl who's amazing or whatever, and to me it sets itself up well for this to be his swan song. I don't want it to be just from the fact that I like Loki and I like Tom Hiddleston's character, but the growth has
From a
been so
story,
great.
right?
From a story standpoint, it's been written so well and done so well.
Yeah.
It makes sense to end it here.
And it's funny because Sophia DiMartino has done an excellent job um, playing this Sylvie character, and
Yeah.
the Sylvie character is now she's a very much a hero character at this point. Not the Enchantress character that I thought we would be getting, and
No.
they still talk about enchantment powers, and her name is Sylvie, so it's certainly still I think some version of the Enchantress, but not someone I expect to be in the Masters of Evil.
And you
Whenever they
noticed in this episode, she admits that cause we're the same at a certain point in this episode. I forgot where. I don't know if I wrote it in my notes, but it was to me like this episode had the most like full throated like I am a Loki kind of comment from her, because she's been, again, as I said, very resistant to it. But
right,
there's a point I remember the words where she says, Loki says something. He's like, what? So, well, because we're the same. I think it was right when they were about to. It was about how he doesn't know how to do enchantment powers, and
right,
he's like, how am I supposed to? I don't know what we're doing. How am I supposed to be able to do this? He's like, you can do this because we're the same, which is a very sweet and just very just like this is a very good, well written, great line. But like that
right.
was like, but like seeing where they were in the beginning, where the even thought of being called a Loki was offensive to her. That's a long level of growth there. Um, that was only accomplished through her time with
It
our 2011 Loki.
it would be quite interesting to see them because look, we think I do agree that Sylvie I think is certainly going to make it out of this series.
Definitely,
I don't think this is a one out. I don't think this is a one off for that character. I also think that they are going to be setting up a potential return for Kid Loki as well.
I think so too.
And that
That's why I mentioned
Tom
that earlier.
Hiddleston could be, and it's interesting because I wonder if they have a Kid Loki, would a potential like is Kid? I mean, Kid Loki I think will be Kid Loki for a while, but will he also eventually become Tom Hiddleston? In some other story. That's the other. It's the
Yeah.
other path where they could bring him back, but it's not the same Loki that we've seen. But I think obviously there's Young Avengers projects, some sort of Young Avengers project coming up, maybe multiple. And I don't know if he'll be a member on the team, but does he show up? Does he cameo? Is he a villain? Is he sort of an anti-hero in that story? I think that there's potential for that. Of course, he's got Croaky, as they call him, the alligator, with him as well. So that'll be an interesting thing to track as well.
It will be. So I guess let's talk about one. We learned that Mobius is also in this place. So Mobius was the first kind of last week to be pruned, and again there was a thought that oh no, we lost Mobius for good. But he is in this episode, and he helps save Sylvie from alive the first time. During that time where Sylvie is running away, she's able to kind of link with alive and kind of see something which we looked like a house or something like that. As she was running away before she's picked up by Mobius himself in a pizza truck that some people noticed that was like very reminiscent of Pizza Planet from Pixar and Toy Story. And he thought it was ironic. I also saw it. I think it was shout out to I think it might have been Den of Geek, who was like, of course you also had a Pixar actor or voice actor in
Owen Wilson.
Owen Wilson, driving fast in a car. Who, of course, he played Lightning McQueen. Cars in
Yes.
a truck that's similar to a Pixar movie, Toy Story, with the Pizza Planet. So this I feel like this episode might have had the most layers in it when it came to those things. There also was the high C juice box that the Kid Loki was drinking, which is a reference to Ghostbusters. There was There's a lot of stuff in this episode.
Oh yeah.
Um, but talking about Mobius, he says that his mission once he gets back is to tell everybody about the TVA, and eventually, after he after the team kind of departs, when they say their goodbyes, he says that his plan is to burn it all down. Shout out to Seth Rollins, the WWE. So what did you think of kind of Mobius's role in this episode and things he said, and then also like how do you project his mission at the TVA will go? Because I just feel it feels weird at this point because I just feel like for a lot of people, whatever is going to happen with Loki and Sylvie walking through the void essentially, like that to me is all I really care about. So like it was kind of weird for me, my story choice to send him back to the TVA.
Yeah, I thought that was
because I felt like if anything, Ravonna is gonna she's gonna try to make it to wherever Loki and Sylvie were. So I'm like, what's at the TVA that needs to be done?
Yeah, that was probably the low point of the episode for me. Mm-hmm. Was that moment where you realize that they're gonna just go their separate ways, and Mobius is like, yeah, I guess I'm going back to the TVA, and Loki's like, well, yeah, I guess I'm staying here, and it didn't really make, I don't think, much sense. I mean, it made some sense, but
I mean, it didn't make sense. Some sense that to me, it's not believable that Mobius can go by himself and shut down the
That's
whole
what
TVA.
I'm wondering. I'm like, what are you going to accomplish by doing you're going to step foot and then they're going to arrest you,
right? Exactly.
For crimes against the sacred timeline or whatever you're going to call it. Like,
yeah,
I don't know what he's going to be able to accomplish. He has a tempad, but he's not a super soldier. So, it was a strange. I mean, I feel like my thing is, look, I know Loki seems like he's going on what may seem like a suicide mission. So I'm not saying you gotta follow him on it, but you got to think about like maybe we'd be better off maybe I'd be better off helping Loki and then maybe going back and be taking down the TVA together.
Right.
I don't. There wasn't much.
Like I thought maybe
none of that was even discussed.
I thought maybe he'd take like Kid Loki, old Loki with him. Like he was just like he was going solo dolo. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, so that was weird. They'll address that next week and maybe they'll have a better explanation for what's gonna. And we'll see, when we see how everything unfolds, we'll get a better understanding of why he may have felt like that was the right decision, and it was so unanimous. Like it wasn't like they didn't discuss like, oh, you're gonna go by yourself, or sure you don't want to stay with us. Like it was like, oh yeah, see you, Mobius. Nice knowing you.
Yeah. No, it was a emotional goodbye though.
It was a goodbye
to see Loki actually give him a hug.
Yeah,
it was nice, but I agree it did seem ill advised at best.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
At the worst, it was ill advised. I mean, at the best, it was ill advised, and
worst is nonsensical.
Right. Yeah. I didn't quite get it. I also didn't quite get, honestly, and we're doing any little critiques, though this was an outstanding episode and probably the best one, at least in my opinion. We'll get to the scores, I guess, soon. I didn't quite get what old Loki and Kid Loki's decision was in that moment also. They were just like, we're gonna stay. We're gonna live here.
This is our home.
And I'm like, okay, but like, they're gonna fight. They're gonna fight Elias. Like, what happens if they win?
Yeah.
Like I didn't quite understand like their logic behind. All they said was that this was their home, which I understood that part, but it seemed like whatever was gonna happen was gonna be. It seemed like if somehow Loki and Sylvie won, it could greatly change their home. So why would they just sit on the sidelines? It just seemed like
and it for all of them. That's why that whole.
And I know old Loki, of course, didn't sit on the sidelines, but I just I thought that original decision didn't make sense.
All of their destinies seemed aligned. They all seem aligned on some level, which is why it made sense for them to join together.
Because they've been living in this hellhole for forever. They want
to get out there anti-TVA, and so the other Loki.
So is Mobius, and so is Loki, and so is Sylvie. So it was like I just thought, we're gonna have a dope team. This is gonna be the 5-man squad that's gonna take down all of this. And they were just like, we're going our separate ways. And I'm like, I don't know. This feels kind of like we need to get more out of that TVA set. We got that budget we use in that TVA set. We got to make sure we get good use out of it. And I don't even know. I couldn't quite explain the other Loki decisions though. Again, of course, old Loki. The classic Loki, as they're calling him, does come back. So
and I think they're also setting up for a more personal finale than we would have gotten if they all would have went in there. You know.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I think that's also why I think this is probably more of a Hills and Swan song because of that. I agree. I think they are setting up for a very intimate, um, kind of close to this. It's not a very contained story. It's not a very grounded story, but I do feel like they kind of want to make this as grounded an ending as possible. Though I think, however it ends, I do think there will be pretty big ramifications. It has to be. To me, and I think that this does kind of lead to a very interesting conversation regarding the finale. Because I felt like, I think with Falcons and Winter Soldier, like they didn't have this issue. I think we kind of knew where everything was going, so it was just kind of a matter of delivering on what we expected. I do feel like Loki has a little bit of WandaVision, nowhere near that level of like I need to see Magneto tomorrow, but like they do have this little bit of idea of like, look, you've kind of set up a story that, like we said a little bit last week, like the ramifications are that should be mega with what's going on.
Yeah,
And in some ways, I feel like this one is even more so than WandaVision because, again, I felt like WandaVision for us was us taking a lot of leaps. With this, it seems like, unless you're gonna tell me a lot of this just was a lie and really wasn't what they said it was, which is possible. The idea that the person behind that's been altering time forever, since the beginning of time, arguably, this person, they're going to be a showdown with this person potentially, and we're going to learn about how this all started. It feels like if somehow they don't deliver on this, it will be a pretty big disappointment. I don't think that they will. I feel way more confident that they will get something major next week than I did with WandaVision, where I was getting very nervous. But I think that needs to be put out there that I think there's a lot riding on this next episode because they've walked past what we've been told was the void, which was the end of time, to it looks like a kind of a haunted mansion situation.
Yes.
And
Kirk the Cowardly Dog, Scooby Doo.
And who's to say, or we don't know what's gonna happen. Like we have no idea what's gonna happen.
Yeah,
this exciting, but sometimes that's scary too.
Yeah, no post credit scene, which
no post credit scene either.
Not appreciated, but the decision they made.
Which is also why I think this next episode is going to deliver. Because I think that they can't tell us anything. I think they got to just let us watch this joint on its merit, which gets me excited.
And I feel like similar to WandaVision, I think unfortunately because they've made the who's behind the TVA thing such a big mystery, that I think a lot of the reaction to the episode will be based off of people's opinion of the reveal. And which is it's a dangerous game because WandaVision had a great finale, but people didn't like the reveal or lack thereof reveals, and so it kind of fell flat on its face a little bit. Falcon and Winter Soldier didn't lead itself into that as much. Didn't lean into this, who's behind the curtain. They had the power broker stuff, but it was pretty obvious, and when it was what it was, it didn't ruin the show. Loki is a little bit more like WandaVision in that regard, so that'll be interesting. We have a guess, but if it's not who we think, that'll be interesting to see the reactions of people.
So let's get to that before I think we do our score. So we have our classic Loki comes through in the clutch when it looks like the enchantment is not going to work. He comes through, creates an entire Asgard, which is just, again, the power of this man is incredible. He kind of shows the power of Loki himself is incredible. Creates an Asgard that's able to, for the time, distract the Alioth. Once he kind of wears down, eventually, the illusion's gone and he gets, eaten or what. It's hard to explain exactly what happens, but I'm talking about Loki. He gets just like killed.
Right, yeah.
He's off the board. From our standpoint, cheers to classic Loki, old Loki. He went out like a rider, man. He was like glorious purpose. He just took his L. I like that. And then but that distraction was enough for him to get their act together and get that enchantment of Alioth. And once that enchantment is hit, it's like the door is open and that void enters, And I think that leads us to that last question: is what is behind this door? Who is behind this door? Um, I I I think there's a good chance that it's Loki. I need to put that out there. I think that it because at the end of the day, I know we've been on this Kang thing, but the show is called Loki. Is a lot of it's been about this development of Loki, this exploration of Loki, and this um what's the other word? This just like obsession with Loki.
Yeah.
And I thought it was fitting. I know it's again a Loki show, but I thought it was interesting that all the people that we were introduced to this week that were in the void were Lokis. And the explanation was, well, they're survivors. So I was like, okay, but and even if there are plenty of other people on that island or in the void that haven't been killed yet, but we just didn't get introduced to them, we just happen to get introduced to all the Lokis. I do feel like there may be something with this person particularly feeling like he needs to get all these Lokis out of the way for whatever reason.
Right.
And if that is the motivation, then the number one candidate is Loki. If that's not the motivation, then I think Kang becomes the number one. I think to me that those are the two answers to me to what's going on. Obviously, one is obviously more exciting than the other, but I think we need to prepare for both. I think there's a chance that they can make this Loki one still seem really good and cool, but I do think that that's a possibility after this week.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've been, 99, 100% certain that we were getting Kang the Conqueror in this
Mm-hmm.
show, or that he was behind all this. He was pulling the strings. Um, I'm gonna walk it back a little bit. I'm gonna go to 90%. I'm still confident that it's Kang the Conqueror, but I don't think it's a guarantee because the 10% comes in with a lot of what EJ said. Um, I think about WandaVision and Falcon Winter Soldier, and I just feel like when these shows when these shows are written and you get all the way up to the finale, I feel like to have a reveal of who the the person is, who the villain is, or who the major reveal is going to be, it tends to be someone with some sort of connection to the people we've seen, or
Right.
someone that we've seen already. Like, and this idea that they're going to introduce Kang the Conqueror, and that he's going to be the villain of this entire Loki series, and they're going to introduce him in the last episode, um, seems a little far fetched, given the way the story has progressed. And like you said, it's been so personal. Like
Right.
taking somebody that has no connection to Loki at all, and doesn't seem like he's going to have any connection to Loki going forward, and make him so deeply connected to
Important
Loki
to
in the
this
MCU.
story. Yeah, to this
Yeah,
Loki
and make him
story.
so important to this Loki story would be strange. Um, so what I'll say is that the other reason why I say 90% is, and why I still think it's Kang, is that I still think the TVA is tied to Kang the Conqueror. I don't think that is a coincidence. I don't think that was a mistake. I just think that who we may see in the next episode, I agree, could wind up being a version of Loki, and those two things could act. I think
I I was gonna say I'm also not convinced that, especially because we saw a Loki today that was black. I'm also not convinced that Kang is also not a future descendant of Loki. I'm not convinced that that could be a possibility. We know uh, the Kang that we know is a descendant of Reed Richards, but I mean, this is Marvel. They could do whatever they want, especially with the movies.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, so the idea that this Kang could be a descendant of Loki, and that's why there's a tie in there, it wouldn't surprise me to the least bit. Um, Especially
now,
because so much of this, Kang is this master strategist and this master planner, and it's like
yeah,
maybe his number one attribute. And so much
yeah,
of this story and the jokes about the story is being like, "You're Loki. How do you not have a plan? Like, you gotta have a better plan.
yeah,
This we're Lokis." And they keep going back to that point, and I'm just like, again, and I'm not saying this is the likeliest scenario, but these are just
right,
looking at here, and I'm like, well, if they wanted to somehow split the difference, uh,
right,
why can't they just make a descendant of Loki black, and why can't he be Kang? I don't.
yeah.
There's no reason why.
Reed
Can't be.
Richards, as far as we know, isn't black as well. But that could also change,
Right,
and we'll
exactly.
see how that
Yeah,
goes.
yeah. We don't know
It's
what's
just
gonna
as
happen with that.
likely, as far as we know, it's just as likely as Loki. But um, no, yeah, I mean, I feel like the things that put it in Kang's favor is from some of the stuff that we've seen and some of the stuff we saw in this episode, that when they're in the void, like first of all, there's a giant sphinx in there, which um I don't know what it's a reference to, but it could be a reference to the fact that there's a version of Kang that was Rama Tut, who was a pharaoh
Hmm.
who, fought against the Fantastic Four and the Avengers, like, and before he becomes Kang, and like, what if that is one of his origins in this, um, in this MCU? What if this is a version of Kang. Well, first of all, we saw of the Stark Tower, the Avengers Tower that had it was broken down, but it had a QENG,
Yes.
which pronounced Kang, you would think, um, but it's spelled differently. So I mean, again, like if Kang isn't in this show, Marvel can't say,
We
"Oh, we
didn't
didn't
we
think
didn't
you guys."
we didn't do things to make you think that
Yeah,
Kang was
yeah,
gonna be
yeah.
tied
We
to this
weren't
something.
trying to, make you think that Kang was in it.
His
Like
wife
you
is in
don't,
the show.
yeah, you don't put Renslayer in the
Right.
show and then say, "Oh, we never said anything about Kang. What are you talking about? You
And to
guys
be
said it."
honest, I feel like Remslayer remains to me the maybe the number one reason why I still feel like if I had to really choose between it's a
Right.
version of Loki and it's Kang, that is Kang. Because when you mention why is this like this Remslayer doesn't seem to know or she doesn't even know who's behind this, and I think
I
there's
think
some
that this, yeah.
what
I'll let you
you
finish.
say. Well, she's a variant. Well, what if like there's a Remslayer who's with Kang, who's Kang's wife, and this is a variant of that woman, and perhaps she has memories of Kang, or there's something there, and that's why she's kind of been so beholden to just working for whoever's behind this, no matter what. Because maybe there's a connection there that we're not seeing
Man,
on things. But I mean,
man.
I don't know. I mean, it sounds like you think I might have hit a chord here, but
He, the light
but
bulb just went on in this place,
no,
man.
I'm saying like because to me that there's something odd about okay, you don't know who this is, but you're 100% beholden to making sure this person is not in danger, that everything still goes to plan how they want, and that they're not disturbed. That doesn't make sense. It just doesn't. So then you say, okay,
Right.
well, what reason could that be? That's why I said I think she knows more than she's letting on. Some of this I don't think is necessarily conscious. It might be subconsciously she knows more and she has some kind of connection to this person. And I would argue maybe for Kang, when it came to creating variants, maybe when it came to, okay, like dag, my wife is a variant, or future version of my wife's a variant. Let me not make her just like any other TV agent. I'm gonna make her the judge. Like
Right.
it could have been him looking out for her. To been like, all right, I know you're
Right.
not actually my wife or whatever, but I don't want you just out here in these streets.
I
Like, yeah, maybe you start off as a soldier, but maybe he quickly was like, nah, you gonna make you a wife, or maybe he decided as he got later on, he fell in love with Ravonna that became his wife, and then he's like, oh snap, I put a variant out there that's out there fighting Lokis and stuff. Nah,
Yeah, yeah.
we're gonna get her out of there. We're gonna make her a judge because I trust her with my life and I trust that person.
I
So
also
that's the
have
main reason
heard.
for me when we get to this show in theories why I still lean towards Kang is behind this.
I also have heard the theory. What if Kang isn't behind the TVA, but that the TVA's mission and goal is to prevent Kang
From
from
happening
escaping?
or
Like maybe
escaping.
Kang is the person. I mean, look, I'm not predicting Jonathan Majors is going to show up next. If I were to bet, I would say he's not going to be in the next episode
I
just
kind
because
of
they
agree with
haven't
that.
said he's Jonathan Majors. Like, I have the reason to believe he's going to be in it, but it's not impossible. But what if Kang is on some level the person that's in the castle, or what if he's like, they locked up, locked the key, they locked him up and threw away the key, and somehow, the whole point of the TVA is to prevent Kang from escaping. Like Kang the Conqueror, if we let him get out, like the whole timeline is gonna go bonkers and take over. the other theory that I think is less likely, but also possible.
Yeah, I think I definitely also think that's possible. Look, again, this I agree with you when you say like this show, like unlike WandaVision where I feel like we definitely made leaps. I mean, this show is pointing to Kang.
They're
Even
pointing to Kang.
yeah, I mean even the castle that you see. I mean, yeah, I see. Again, shout out to Dan the Geek. They said um, this most likely is Castle Limbo, home of Kang the Conqueror. Like again, like
It's Jonathan Major. All right, so
even when they open the void, the colors you see are green and purple and blue. These are the colors of Kang. It's like if it ain't Kang, they're just trolling. But I definitely feel like
look,
and I'll say this,
WandaVision,
even if somehow this Kang isn't behind this, I still think there's a great chance there's some Kang tie into all this. Like I still think maybe there is just a Loki behind this, but I would not be shocked that somehow Kang still gets tied into this story because there's too much imagery, there's too much nods to him for there not to be to me.
So final predictions.
Yeah,
like we did with WandaVision. Will Kang the Conqueror show up?
Will he show up?
Well, is he behind all of this? Is he?
Yes.
Does he play a major role in this story?
Yes,
I agree.
He plays a major role. Is he behind it? I think it's likely, but I think regardless of if he's behind it,
his name will get dropped.
He is his foot what is it? His fingerprints are on this story,
and it will be revealed next week.
Yes.
Well, okay.
It might be in a post-credit scene, but it will be revealed. I think they may play this all the way to the end. I think there's a great chance that happens. We may watch this whole show and be like, "Oh man, that he wasn't there," and then he's there. Because again,
no problem with that.
Remember, I guess I don't remember what was the post-credit scene in Captain America. I don't even remember. Was there one in Falcon?
Falcon Soldier? Sharon Carter on the phone.
Sharon Carter. Okay, that was not that big a deal, but we do remember when they did WandaVision. And remember, again, Falcon and Soldier was supposed to be the first show. But the WandaVision appearance was supposed to be... Dr. Strange was supposed to be in the last episode. He was supposed to show up. So, I think moving forward, this idea that we will see more...
and we know that Black Widow was supposed to have come out a year ago, but we know that Julia Louis-Dreyfus showed up in...
Right.
Falcon and Winter Soldier. It was supposed to be that big reveal. Yeah,
so I really feel like there's going to be... I feel like every one of these shows, we're supposed to get something big. That's I think, what the impression is supposed to be. I think things change and they don't do it. So I think that with this show, I think there's a great chance that the guy or the person, the big reveal is supposed to be Kang in some way.
But you don't think Jonathan Majors is showing up? Because I agree with you on everything.
I think it's like, I think it's, I don't want to say it's even unlikely. I just think that it's up in the air. I think there's just as much chance he could that he can't. You know what I'm saying? And I know that maybe feel like a cop out.
No. And look, me leaning no is going to make me bug out even more if he shows up.
Though it was interesting that, was it last week? He did an interview, or it was this week, or it was recent, where he did an interview, his first interview where he confirms he's Kang.
Well, yeah, last week, yeah. This week he pulled up at a comic book store, holding up a Kang the Conqueror thing. Like, hey.
Yeah.
It's like, weird timing.
Right. Oh, yeah. I mean,
Ant-Man's not filming for a little bit.
all this stuff, I mean, again, if it's all nothing, then man, this is a crazy troll by Marvel. And I think we'd have to have a conversation about, is this smart strategy by Marvel? I would argue it's not.
Yeah, they already went down this path. Will Tom Hiddleston's Loki survive this next episode?
I'm gonna say no. That's how I feel right now. Is I say no.
I think he will, and I think they're gonna set up. I think you have a strong case, and you're probably the betting odds favorite there that he won't make it out. You set up a really strong case, but I still lean that it's tough to carry this development and take him off. And also, it's Tom Hiddleston's Loki. That's where I think Marvel, one of their, you want to say, critiques is that they don't want to take characters off the table. And
Right.
you take a guy like Loki, they've had many opportunities to take him off the table, and they have yet to do so. So I don't see it happening now. Um, that's all of the predictions I have.
Yeah, I'm
I
trying
don't
to
know
think
if
of
you have
are there any other ones.
anything that's been left.
Will do you think that Renslayer's connection to Kang will be revealed in this next episode?
Yes, and my guess is that they don't have one yet, but that they will.
But that it will perhaps start. I think that's
Yes,
also a great
I
chance.
think this is the origin,
Like
and I think
I like my theory,
that
but I think what your theory is also definitely possible that this is the
the
beginning of it.
actress, Batha Raw, said that this was her origin story, and it's like, what does that mean? You know, like Renslayer, like she's not a superhero. Like, what do you mean her origin story? I think that this is going to be, it's setting her up as some sort of, um, you know, clearly some sort of fan almost of the TVA, and is gonna be willing to work for and work with King the Conqueror.
Is the Mobius variant anyone important, or is the original Mobius anyone important?
I'm gonna lean no. And, I
All right.
love your theory, and I hope that you're right, or that your theory was right. But they don't seem to be setting up anything. But he is going to the TVA, and they didn't take him off the shelf completely. He didn't say, "All right, I'm going to 1994
All
to
right.
go on some
Get
jet
my
skis."
get my jet ski. Yeah,
Yeah, like he's going back
he's going back
to
for
knock some
he
skulls.
wants he wants to smoke.
So this isn't the last time we'll see Owen Wilson's character. So I think no, but as Lee Corso likes to say, closer than the experts think.
Shout out to
not,
Lee Corso, man.
not so fast, my friend.
uh, that's a great reference. I'm mistake with my theory. I think that he is someone important. I think that he is someone important. I think that's gonna end up being like like no pun intended, the low key
Crazy reveal.
reveal that I think people are gonna be like, we were all talking about whether or not Kang was Kang, and we'll learn that answer soon. But like, I think that's gonna be one. Like, yo,
I'm gonna
that was
pin you
that
on
guy.
this.
Yeah.
Do you have a name? Have you thought about it enough?
I
Do
don't
you
think
even
he's a
have a name?
I don't think he's a Fox character. Let's get that out the way. I don't think he's anybody that was acquired. I really think there's a chance he's Nova.
Nova is an interesting.
That's
Would
my
be an
that
interesting.
would be my guess is that he's a
They
version.
mentioned Xandar earlier in
Yeah,
the
they
in the.
did. Um,
Uh,
my guess, and we know they want to do Nova. Obviously, we know more about the Sam Alexander character, but what greater way to do the other character?
the other name. What if he's? I don't think this makes much sense. What if he's like Adam Warlock? Like I
That's a
know
good
we
one
were
too.
supposed to be getting him in Guardians 3.
Yeah,
I feel like I thought like Adam Warlock was like created. I think that I think that was the point that they were creating him, and that he was going to be in Guardians 3. But if you're talking about a major character that we know is coming,
mm-hmm.
that the casting hasn't been announced. I wonder if maybe it's Owen Wilson. But so that's the name I'm throwing out there. But yeah, that's another interesting theory.
I think those are all the main ones. I guess I would have in terms of questions. I think the last question, and it's funny because we've kind of been off this because they've created so many questions since our like mind blown episode 2 moment. But I think we have to go back to, is this the start of the multiverse? Like, we need a
Yes.
definitive answer on that. You really think it is?
Yeah, I think that variants. I think that when we see, and I'm going to go as far as to say when we see Tobey Maguire and Tom Holland and Andrew Garfield, that they will all be variants of each other, and that concept will have been introduced. And I think when we get into Multiverse of Madness, I think this terminology, this TVA speak, variants and the timeline and things of that nature will be used, and it will be a callback to Loki. And
Right.
What a great way to introduce such a really foreign concept that no one, if you would have done this without Loki, it would have been, shoved into 5 minutes of a 2-hour movie, or maybe even 2 minutes of a 2-hour movie. And now we have a whole show explaining everything.
And quick answer on this: do you think that the TVA speed that you mentioned, the variant, do you think that also will be part of any of the explanation to how we get anything involving the Fox characters, whether it be the Fantastic Four or mutants?
I do not. I mean, I
Okay.
think it'll be I mean, it'll be a part of, just like with the Spider-Man.
Because
I
did you
think
think it was
I think there
interesting
will
this
be a
week that
specific.
did you think it was interesting this week that Hugh Jackman was posting pictures hanging
I
out with
thought about it,
Kevin
and
Feige?
I was like, look, is he going to be a variant, or is he one of the variants of Wolverine? And I think that's how I view it. I don't think that any sort of event caused the X-Men showing up. I think the X-Men have still already been here, but I don't think that they're not taking those characters off the table when you set up a multiverse.
Right.
And that a Secret Wars type of project could involve some of those characters coming
Hugh
over
Jackman.
and things of that nature.
Right.
The other one, the last thing I want to ask
Yeah.
is, what do you think is the deal with Miss Minutes? Is she just... Tara Strong had said earlier during the show there's more to be revealed about Miss Minutes.
Mm-hmm.
She's the other character that we've seen that could potentially...
I think to me, it turns out like what's the biggest possible thing that Ms. Minutes could be a part of, and I don't think that I've seen anything that necessarily negates it, but I think there's a very good chance. No, I don't say very good chance. I think there's a possibility that Ms. Minutes is somehow an AI created by Kang the Conqueror and is actually working for Kang the Conqueror.
100%.
And I 100% feel like what we saw this week could have also been Kang's AI looking out for Remslayer. The stalling, the helping them out. I think that.
I don't think that this is the last we've seen of Miss Minutes in Loki.
Right. I think Miss Minutes, by the time, let's say we do get introduced to Kang, it's gonna turn around. That thing's gonna look super sinister, and you're gonna realize, oh my god, that little cute thing was this crazy Ultron-looking kind of technology, and because Kang's behind it, and this was just
this like the way we're hyping up. Like it's Marvel.
And look, man, I know it sounds crazy. And we may come back next week.
We're writing a great story right now.
I know, and we come back this week, and people will be like, "Man, y'all said all this stuff, and none of it came true."
Yeah,
but I mean, I guess this is the fun in it, because Marvel's got to deliver at some point, because they give us major moments. So I think in some ways maybe they haven't delivered in the biggest.
I mean, it's like what we did with
shows, but
we did it with Quicksilver. It's like we hyped up. So this Quicksilver is gonna, he's gonna take the thing off, and all of a sudden he's gonna be like, "Where's Charles?" Blah blah blah, and ended up being Ralph Boner.
Ralph Boner.
So there's cooler stories out there that they've left on the table before it. So, hopefully they'll.
Though I will say, I know you said you don't think the X-Men are part of this, but I will say if your theory is right about the variants introducing maybe other characters, who's to say Ralph Boner isn't a variant of Quicksilver? Also, that could be a reason why they went that route. You never know. We're way over time here, or more than an hour. So let's quickly do scores. So this episode, man, I enjoyed the hell out of this episode. I'm gonna give this another 8.5. So I guess that ties it with last week's episode, which I also thought was outstanding. Shout out to Old Man Loki. I thought he was dope. Shout out to Kid Loki. I thought just that. The humor that the episode had in the middle with those interactions, or kind of the beginning / middle with those interactions with the other Lokis, the character moments between Sylvie and Loki, I thought were important. I think they set up, the future of where these characters go. I think it sets up Sylvie's future as a pillar of the MCU. I think it sets up perhaps maybe this being the end of that 2012 Loki that we were introduced to. I thought the climax action scene was mega, and I think we set up just a whale of a final episode where we're like, they're going into this beyond the void, and we don't know what's behind that door. We have no idea. We can only guess. And when a show leaves you just guessing, and you don't know what's gonna happen, you have some educated guesses, some decent hypotheses, but you don't know for sure. I mean, that's where else could you? That's a perfect setup. You know what I'm saying? So I really didn't have any issue with this episode. It was just really good. But yeah, I'll go 8.5.
I'll go 8.
By the way, the only issue I would say would be just like the Mobius. So again, I thought that splitting up thing, it was well acted and touching, but I don't think it made it much sense. So that would probably that knocks it down from like a 9. Because I just thought that seemed very convenient writing to just get people where you need them to be to forward your finale.
I'll go with an 8. I echo a lot of the same sentiments. I thought that this was, again, not the most, again, fast-paced or action-packed episode compared to last week, but I thought it did an excellent job of setting the stage for the finale. And it got us from point A to point B, and it really, a lot. It cleared up some of the confusions that we had from last week, and I think that was going to be clear because that was going to be important because last week set up a lot of different things that had to be explained, that had to be answered, and I think they did that. They did that in this episode. But next week, I think they're setting up for what is going to be a very, very explosive finale, and ultimately, I think really the deciding factor, like I mentioned, is going to be, some of the reveals. If they try and if they try and play it safe, I don't think that'll be a great sign for what the show. And the show has been great. It's similar to WandaVision. Hopefully, people can understand that even if you have a lackluster finale, it doesn't take away from the experience that the show has given, which has been an excellent experience. But with that being said, I think the reveals and if King the Conqueror is in it is going to be a big deal, and how people respond and maybe how I respond. So we'll see.
There you go. Well, I mean, again, this was quite the episode here. We got one more left in our weekly recaps of Loki. So make sure you keep it locked here on New Generation Media. Of course, if you like this video, make sure you give us a like. And of course, subscribe to the channel, New Generation Media, if you also liked our content. And again, leave a comment in the comment section. What did you guys think of this episode? What are the theories that you have? Do you agree with some of our theories? Are there theories that you have yourself that you want to let us know about? Again, leave a comment in the comment section. We read them all. We try to comment on a lot of them as well. So make sure you do that in the comment section. Again, if you liked what you saw here, make sure you subscribe. That'll do it for now. We'll see you guys next week for the finale of Loki. But this is our the end of our season. Episode
Isn't that
5.
crazy?
I know. 3
Last
seasons
of
down.
the almost pretty much the season of Disney Plus Marvel series.
I know. Yeah, because this was like the first pack that they told us we were getting.
And
So,
forgot we have Miss Marvel and Hawkeye after this, so it's gonna be exciting.
exactly. But thank you guys so much for checking this out. For Kendall, I'm EJ. Take it easy, guys. Peace.